Yeah, that's what Mayer used on a lot of them. Some of them, the one we'll be seeing later has got a steel plate, which I think is original too. Hold these mouth right.
Signals coming out.
It was about a year and a half ago.
Was it about a year ago?
Cleaned it up, yeah. Every 4 or 5 years we take it out.
These are typical of Mayer's bronze work plates, and as you can see, the plate that was on Bridges was that, but they had a new insert, a modernized insert in there.
I love that.
Oh,
you know, from a marketing standpoint, the insert plate.
We were playing. I think it was giving us some difficulty. The weight always kind of tilted, so Leon felt better about putting that on there to balance out the weight so it didn't tilt. See if that had improved anything. I don't know whether it made any difference or not, but it was just an attempt to get the weight to stop cocking, because that can then rub a little bit and give you some.
It's in true kind of like fashion, because it was cast out of a sardine can.
Yeah.
So because it's a C thing, I think it's perfect.
I don't know whether you cast that or not. Did you cast that from a sardine can, or is that something you just found?
Which one? Oh, sardine can. Oh yeah, of course.
You did cast it.
Oh yeah.
It's a
good
Leon.
for parts, and it's good for casting. You know?
Yeah,
It's a Leon original.
It's perfect. I think it's a great idea.
I didn't even realize that he spotted there was a
Sardine.
What's it do?
Yeah.
Well, it's helping keep the weight from cocking and rubbing in the rails there. The weight is 120 pounds, right?
Yes, 120.
And it's a good trick to
Was it not balanced?
get that thing in there.
Yeah, the draw made it.
It was
off-center a little.
just, I think it was just the tensioning of the cable tended to twist it. It's given us some interesting moments. The Howard equipped clock down on Callow has been significantly less temperamental. This one is temperamental. The first problem it gave us after we restored it,
wasn't able to join you guys
yesterday. It ran okay for a week or so, and then all of a sudden the rate just went nuts. It was gaining, and we could not figure out. We screwed around and screwed around. Could not figure out what was going on for maybe 2 months. We were messing with it, and the guy was visiting that I correspond with on an email list. He's a professor of mathematics from and lives in New Zealand, but as an American grew up in Oregon, and he's a major clock guy, and so we're showing off our clocks, and he's standing here looking down in there, and he says, the rub marks on that cable. And we hadn't been careful in routing the cable, and the pendulum was rubbing on the cable, and that's was completely screwing things up.
Actually, the cable wouldn't stay down. Over time, it came back up a little bit.
It would work its way up.
Yeah.
And so we had our New Zealand troubleshooter.
Sometimes we worry about
This is the cable for the lights from top?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they put the box right underneath the weight, so I had to make a platform to catch it so the weight doesn't run into the electrical box. Instead of putting it out in the middle of the clock, they put it back under the weight.
so badly corroded.
Too late to change it, so we lived with it.
Marks, and I had one heck of a time getting it.
Oh, for those of you, I don't know, Ernie, did you introduce yourself around? No, this is.
I was trying to. I haven't done all
this is Ernie Lopez, who's the other
Sorry, I couldn't
half.
join you guys yesterday.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Oh, hi there. Yeah.
Ernie's the curator of the West Coast Clock and Watch Museum up in Bellingham.
Very good.
Lives here.
Oh yes, and you're all the
Another submariner. Woods are full of us. And Ernie is the author of The Gold Leaf on this clock, which really makes the clock.
There's nothing like gold.
It's just amazing, and that gold leaf was it's now 12 years old.
12, yeah, 12 years, and it hasn't flaked, it hasn't chipped. It's perfect.
How many dollars worth at the time?
Well, gold was $448 an ounce at that time, and there's approximately, on this clock alone, not the Callow Street, there's about 6.5 ounces, because I had to do a double layer. Oh, wow. I did a double layer just for weathering purposes, and the seagulls haven't marred it, hailstorms haven't marred it, it's held up very well. I'm very happy with it.
Some of it was donated to us by the son of the late Ralph Peel, who was a very active member of Chapter 50 and was involved in the restoration of the Coleman Dock clock. But he had a sign business in Seattle and donated a significant amount of gold leaf for the project.
Now, who owns this clock now?
Kitsap County Historical Society.
Yeah, because the other ones were
As you'll see in the presentation, the clock, when we got it, had a very ugly tin top. Side lamps were gone, top was finials were gone. So these are the copies that we had made from the clock in Pioneer Square that I saw yesterday. And then the globes, I think are street light globes from Seattle. Yeah, they came, those came from Johnny Regali.
Did you do that or?
No, that was all done.
Dave Hogg, yeah. Regali.
When you get to the other clock, you'll find that the casting got dropped and broken, and they had some clocks on top of that.
The bolts that hold that plate in the bottom are not original if you took a look at them. One of the volunteers,
that was one of the...
the bolts that hold the plate here.
Oh, here.
Yeah, you can see no way to grab the nut, and then it takes the pin head.
Yeah, those are kind of cool. It's a good idea, actually.
Well, if a kid got in there, maybe he wouldn't be able to figure it out.
Right.
There's one very interesting bolt down the bottom too. When the city of Bremerton gave us tremendous support on both of these clock projects, and they removed them for us, transported them for us, and they also designed and built this pedestal. But it was the first time they had ever done a street clock pedestal, and so I gave them a blueprint that showed the precise placing of the bolts to match up, which they did, but they weren't real careful about how far down into the concrete they put them. So one of them, well, you couldn't get
It's too short.
You couldn't get a nut on it. So Leon machined a special nut that's about that long to tie down that one corner. Those are just stuff like that never happens to you pros, right? When you guys restore, you never have unexpected problems, right?
Well, there's a picture of one of my guys with a large orange hammer beating the anchor bolts. Trying to get them straight because they were going all out like this. Yeah.
Same exact thing happened to me on the Kansas City clock. Gave them a template how to put it down. They put the anchor bolts into the concrete, but they didn't put them up straight.
We actually give them we actually underwater.
Yeah, I was going to get
so they can
get
two of them.
The other folk on here is when they put the lamps on it, they didn't square them both up with each other, and one's offset from the other, and that bugs me every time I see it.
Already. So you guys can tour the museum. They said it starts at 10:30.
And there's a lot of stuff to look at back there.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk to him a little bit about this while we're here.
Okay.
The dial up here on the left is another Ernie Lopez project. That's one of the original dials from the Moeller clock on Callow that we'll see later on. If you look very closely at it, you'll see it's cracked from one end to the other, and it happened in the Nisqually earthquake in 2000, I think it was. We had I'd say that was about a magnitude 6 plus, centered about 50 miles south of us here, and it shook things up here fairly well and cracked that glass dial. So as part of a clock exhibit that Ernie organized here in 2006, he restored the dial. The numerals are incised in the glass, but all of the paint had gone. So he did those, designed and had the surround built by a fellow up in Polsbo, designed the hands. Then Leon eventually came up with a movement that was nice and reliable.
Does everybody know Leon?
That's a 110 volt quartz, but it corrects for daylight saving time. Never seen it before, but it's been, knock on wood, it's been running for, what, over a year now.
Yeah.
And then the clocks over here are the shipyard clocks. Two of them. Seth Thomas, number 62 there, we think was in the chief reader's office. And the very unusual Howard, number 74 special, I'll be telling you about in the talk. It is, the Howard number 74 is driving a Mayer slave clock to the right there. That I think came out of the Frederick and Nelson lunchroom in Seattle. Old, historic Seattle department store that just closed its doors a few years ago. And then another Mayer is around the corner that's being pulsed by that.
So Ernie Lopez discovered these, right, at the shipyard?
Yes, Ernie found these in his job cooking to the periscope shop and a few other nooks and crannies up there. And
They were about to be appropriated by private individuals, and we managed to. So they were very unhappy when they came down off the wall. So I think some other people had designs on them. Take them home.
But they're owned by the Navy now.
Yeah, they're owned by the Navy Historic Center and has them on long-term loan to us. Leon did all the mechanical restoration work. Ernie did the case restoration, hand rubbed off that case. It had been the victim of many a splattered paint job in the
Well, several
repair
layers
shop.
around the edge where it had been painted around for
Yeah.
60, 70 odd years.
And the mercury pendulum no longer is mercury. The Navy had removed the mercury pendulum when we became aware of how bad mercury was around any other kinds of metals. But I think that perhaps the pendulum had already broken because there was evidence on the backplate that they had cleaned up a mercury spill.
And they had constructed a coffer dam
Yes.
around the pendulum, so the pendulum was swinging inside this lead box. So I guess any residual would be contained. But,
And then as you're going around the museum, go around through the village street scene down here. And the last shop on the left is the John Moeller clock shop, watch shop. And it contains large collection of the tools and artifacts and so on from the Moeller clock, or from the Moeller shop. These were donated by the lady that has the art gallery right next door here. Amy Burnett. She bought the Moeller building after John died in 1985, or in 2005, I'm sorry, and got all of the contents. These were guys that never threw away anything. So we have a really nice collection of what a turn of the century all the way up to the present jewelry store would have had for tools and stuff. So with that, wander around and we'll gather in the back.
The street scene is where the clock is, the
Yeah.
clock shop is.
Yeah, down there. And then I have a display in the back of some Mayer-related stuff. And then we'll get started with the talk here. People have
Table or place for the, so I
Put
put
the
it on the
water.
shelves?
Right here. Okay.
Right around the corner.
Is that gonna make a mark? Should it have something under it?
It's
You'll leave your
it's not
marker
because
out.
it's got a raised area.
Oh, does it?
I don't think it will.
Well, I'm going to go up and sit in the front so I can hear.
Go to it. Hear what?
Carolyn's already come to our house.
There is the here.
She's already come to our house and seen all this stuff. Excuse me. Did you know we have the King Street clock works in our garage now?
I did not.
He's hoping with some help from
Oh,
the
okay. Very good.
symbol and the little display at the King Street station.
We're gonna need for its proposed
Carolyn, what, this
location.
is Chet Extra,
About,
Carolyn McClurkin.
Pleasure.
He's in the National Mortgage Watching Club. He's, we had elected him to represent northwest.
And where do you live?
Well,
Kent.
it did homework.
Yeah.
Well appreciated, and actually for the setting that it's going
This is
into,
pretty
I
impressive.
think so.
It's,
Thanks to eBay.
It's going to hang outside a.
well, somebody has to pay
Yes,
eBay though.
somebody
so-
has to pay eBay.
But now, years ago, he would have had to go to all the antique shops. And one thing came from Spain.
Yeah.
One thing from our trip.
Yeah, the small enameled one came from Spain.
I'm glad to have contributed to have enabled.
Let's see, where is it? This is the one that came from Spain.
All right.
Since
Oh, I'm
her
sorry.
son, but my baby sister.
I think this is the one that was on eBay.
This was on eBay, yeah. That's what I was
This is
saying.
out of a hospital, is that right? We'll find out.
No, I think this is identical to a Frederick and Nelson
I'm
clock.
supposed to take
The hospital
it
clock was on
out. Who's
eBay,
going to answer
and
this? So I've got this.
that was much plainer. And
You are right.
suspended from the ceiling by four bars that came out of the Tacoma Hospital.
Yeah.
And,
there's a set of hands.
You can do it for a lot of money, I don't think.
Yesterday.
no?
Because they had a little
Well,
accident.
it was originally bought by a guy up in Paulsville, and then Alan Bluer bought it from him.
The coil.
I think that was the switch. Isn't that cute?
Oh, I just make room here.
Yes, I did. Phyllis, hi.
How you doing?
It's fine. Good. This is my friend Sandy.
And it senses the coil,
Phyllis.
it sets the
She's the
duration.
one that gave me the information about that.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. But I don't
We can sit right there. Unless you want to sit by Sarah now.
Alan, where's my briefcase?
Right here.
No, that's just, oh, there it is, over there. I need to get my pointer out. Excuse me.
Yeah. We're working on my clock right now. What clock did you just see?
That's the Clallam County Courthouse clock in Port Angeles. Hear a little more about that in a moment.
Nice photography work here.
It's about 3 minutes to 10:30, so that's the advertising start time. Oh, need to
Railroad.
There we go.
Michael's.
3 minutes to 10:30 and your four-sided clock says 10:30.
That's good.
Well, that's, I don't know. Leon set that, oh, I'm going by my old mechanical Rolex, which is 2 minutes slow. Leon probably set that to his Daniels coaxial, right?
Like, yours says it's 10.
Yeah. Okay, if we could grab a seat on 11:30.
Come back here. You can put more chairs in if you'd like.
Well,
I'm going to stand. Would you like a chair?
well, welcome officially to the Kitsap County Historical Museum. I can say officially because I'm on their advisory board. This is a voluntary, unpaid position to which they pay absolutely no attention. So, but you are welcome. And I'd first of all like to recognize Sarah Nell Davis, who is on the board, and to whom they pay attention. Oh, and Carolyn McClurkin, to whom they pay even more attention. She's a past president of the Historical Society and current member of the board.
And character.
And she is our archivist for our museum. I advertised my presentation as a short one, and I had every intention of making it short, but it probably is not. If the call of nature overcomes you, or the backside of your lap is wearing out, feel free to stand up, go do whatever you need to do. Leon has got a hook that he'll drag me off eventually. Let me just talk a few minutes before I start my presentation about what we've got displayed up here. There's a little outline of some of Joseph Mayer's stuff over here in this corner board. And then some typical artifacts that Mayer made as a manufacturing jeweler, because he did a lot of things other than street clocks. So I think street clocks and clock systems were his personal favorite thing. The bread and butter was in manufacturing things like souvenir spoons and pins and pendants for fraternal organizations, funeral urns, bronze plaques for memorials, very similar to the plaques that are out on our street clock. So these two cases here have examples of that. This case is focused on the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition, and there's some explanation here. Mayer was the official, had the concession to produce all the official metal souvenirs at the exposition. Another jeweler named Burnett Brothers had the concession to sell them retail. But this case contains examples of them. They were in the form of souvenir dollars, spoons, and so on. And then these two are a sample of some of Mayer's souvenir spoons, mostly focused on scenes in the Pacific Northwest. One tray out here is nothing but mountains. Mount Rainier and Mount Hood and the Olympic Mountains and so on.
Are they signed, Paul?
Yes, there's a, Mayer had two trademarks. An early trademark before 1907 was a little triangle with a fleur-de-lis in it. And then after 1907, it was a cross pick and shovel, reflecting their interest in the gold. Then some clock-related stuff. This is a Mayer slave clock, similar to the one that's out in front, but it's his early form of the hands. The movement in it was made before 1920. The clock itself apparently was sold after 1920. This little treasure here you'll want to play around with after is it's a limit switch for an automatic clock winding system that Mayer invented. Came off the Tacoma City Hall clock. The bits and pieces right here are part of the train from the King Street Station clock that the group toured yesterday. These had been saved for many years by a local clockmaker named Storm Small. George Lewis, who founded the school at Seattle, North Seattle Community College, the watch and clockmaking school. He removed all of those parts from the King Street Station clock when it was converted to electric control in 1957. So they've been resting since the early 60s in Storm Small's shop. And now he's put them on my conscience. This is the escape wheel. It's a double three-legged gravity escapement for those of you who care. And is the same as, on a smaller scale, as Big Ben in London. The escapement was invented by the guy that designed Big Ben. These are some bits and pieces of Mayer clocks. This is the motion work and one of the connecting rods from the behind the dial work in a large Mayer 4-dial clock. And these pieces back here are part of the motion work and connecting stuff associated with Mayer's most complex clock. We call it the 8-dial clock. It had 8 small dials right at eye level at the top of the base, and that was the motion work that controlled those. We have a mystery piece that I want the experts to look at and tell me who made. And this is the bottom to the 4-dial clock, which you'll see some more of in the presentation. So that's a little bit of what's up here. After we're through, that's my grandson. Oh, and then this wonderful thing here was a souvenir of the Templars National Convention in Seattle in 1925. 100,000 Knights Templar came to Seattle from all over the country for that. You want to look at it, it is a canoe. One of the Northwest Indian canoes. Designs have been hammered in. It was a cigar stand. You can find anything on eBay. And Ellen's afraid I will.
Yeah,
So-
Paul always sends out emails and says, don't bid on this. I'm not getting
It's considered bad form to bidding against one of your fellow collector nut buddies.
Do you want the lights off?
Oh, crap.
Here, just.
Yeah, let me, we have a momentary technical problem here.
There,
There you go. Okay, I got it. Let me get this started here.
Turn the light out.
Yeah, why don't you turn him out?
There you go. All right. So, this is,
This is the crop gang that are here.
okay, so, you know what I'm going to need is somebody to punch a down button here. Can you manage that for me when I give you an eye? It's right there.
Gotcha.
Okay. So the Pacific Northwest Street Clock Gang are some of these characters that you see sitting around here, for those of you who are locals. And this is a very informal group, no rules, no dues, no charter, no nothing. But we managed to get together for a tour of Seattle yesterday and Bremerton today. And I think Steve Schmidt was the first one to come up with this. And he and Rob put together an interesting route. I wrote a little guidebook, and
I was scared. I was scared yesterday. We were all in the elevator over at the King Street station, and I was afraid that elevator was going to quit, and I'd be trapped with these guys.
Okay, go ahead. So I want to talk first about Bremerton's first street clock, since you're in Bremerton. Frank Knapp bought Bremerton's first street clock to Front Street from Seattle in 1913. Okay, go ahead. And
Is Front Street what, Washington Street now?
yes, well, sort of. If you stand at the shipyard gate down there,
Down.
you're at the foot of Front Street, and then looking right straight north. So Knapp worked in Seattle jewelry stores as a young man. In 1913, he struck out on his own and came over here. And that was the same year that the Seth Thomas clock, that was the very first street clock in Seattle, eventually sold to Joseph Mayer. Joseph Mayer sold it to a jeweler named Moore, and Moore went out of business in 1912. And so I believe that this clock came over with Knapp.
What would they cost in 1912?
A new one would have been about $800, $600 to $800 for a 2 dot.
What is that in current money?
Current money, that'd be $10,000, $15,000. $3,600 I know is $50,000, because $3,600 is what one of Mayer's massive 4-dial, most advanced clocks cost in the 1920s, and that was equivalent to $50,000. Okay, go ahead. Notice the souvenir spoons being advertised.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I
It'd be easier if you use the arrows, maybe the right and left arrow.
Okay, now you good.
All right. Okay, go ahead. And then on to the next one. Good. So we see the clock, okay, hit it again. This is, and again, Mayer's, this is the first clock right here at the time of the Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition. These clocks migrated very often, and if you've ever moved one, and Leon and Ernie and I have, and Chuck Roser and Tom Erb have, you know that this is not a trivial operation. You're dealing with thousands of pounds of cast metal. And they moved these things around like they were on wheels, because the jewelers were constantly relocating. So here we see this clock. It was probably only here, we figured maybe a year, and then moved on. But it was there in time for the Alaska Yukon Pacific. So do it again.
Okay, well, actually, if you might want to mention that this is a clock that was right in front of the Hope Building, where we ate lunch.
Yes, this moved here from the position in front of the Hope Building. Directly across the street is one of the first big 4-dial clocks to come to Seattle. Mayor was the agent for that with Howard. It's a big top-notch 4-dial, but they're sitting in front of the Welcome Arch at 2nd and Marion. We were standing on that corner yesterday. The Welcome Arch for President Taft, who, after opening the Alaska Yukon Pacific with a telegraph key made by Joseph Mayer that included a whole bunch of gold nuggets, he came to the fair. Okay, go ahead.
Is that actually stone or?
No, it's a wooden,
Oh, okay.
temporary wooden structure. Okay, so this is our second, both our first and second street clocks. Go ahead. Knapp moved to Pacific and Burwell in 1919. We walked past that corner. And then, next one. The second street clock showed up just up the street. This is sort of a poor man's street clock. It was made by Gillette in Chicago. It was electric, had a little electric impulse motor up in here, and a master, relatively inexpensive master clock in the jewelry store. Both of those clocks disappeared in the 1920s. This is from a postcard, and is absolutely the only illustration we've ever found of that. That's thanks to Russ Warren, our local historian. Okay, go ahead. And on to the next. Okay, do it again. The first jeweler in Seattle came in 1901, or in Bremerton came in 1901, very shortly after Bremer platted Seattle and started selling flan. His name was Tucker. He lasted for almost 20 years and sold out to Jorgen Nelson Sr., who brought the clock that we have out in front. Go ahead. George Moeller, who bought the clock that we will be seeing later on, came to Seattle from St. Louis in 1917. He was not just a jeweler, watchmaker, he was an entrepreneur. He sold Columbia cars. He was fascinated by electric clocks. Along the side here was the store regulator, which was an American, what is the Chicago, Ernie?
American Clock Company.
American Clock Company in Chicago that had an electric wine clock. It was a sort of a flying pendant.
Yes, semaphore wine.
Yeah, semaphore. It had a magnet that would flip a weight up, and then the weight would very slowly tick down, and about a minute later it would be flipped back up again. So that was his store regulator, and it passed on to his son. His son had it in the store, and we were lucky enough to have it here for an exhibit in 2006. But this shows George in his second shop down up in the Charleston district. Okay, next one, and again. So here we have Jorgen Nelson's clock, our clock out in front, in 1928 down on Pacific, about where we were standing as we walked up here. You can see that it had a top decoration and side lamps. Our side lamps, the brackets are identical, but our globes are a little grander. Go ahead. And this is what the clock looked like in 1968. In about 1940, Jorgen Sr., like Ben Bridge Sr., tarted the clock up with a neon sign and a tin top hat, and unfortunately all the bits and pieces probably disappeared in World War II scrap drives. Next one. And then this is what it is now in front of the museum. Okay, next one. Here is Moeller's clock. Moeller moved to this location in 1927, and the following year, we don't know who got the first clock, but they weren't going to let one of them get ahead of the other one. And 1928 turns out to be a pretty good year for Joseph Mayer selling clocks, because it's the same year Ben Bridges' clock was purchased. Go ahead. One more. John Muller, the son, moved the clock to Callow in 1954 when he took over the business. This is John in 1999 winding the clock. You can see it's starting to, the plates on this were thin brass pressed plates. George didn't spring for the big bronze castings, and they were backed by some god-awful white plaster of Paris concrete, almost like material, but that ran down the clock for years. John continued in business until he passed away at age 85, just a few months before we had his clock completed. He would open his shop once a week, Thursday afternoons, shoot the breeze with his buddies, change a few watch batteries, and mostly he would tell people they couldn't afford the things that he had in the shop that were really desirable, like his shop regulator and some fancy wristwatches and his street clock. So all collectors got the same response: you couldn't afford that. While I was negotiating for the clock, I went down one Thursday afternoon. He wasn't open. I thought, oh man, he's sick or something like that. Went back the next week and he was open, and I said, why weren't you open last week? He said, it was the 5th Thursday in the month. The man's got to have some time off. Next month. And there it is now. We'll see that later on. Okay, next slide. All right, so Joseph Mayer, born in 1868, comes to America on his own at age 15, turns 16 about the time he arrives here. Sent for his younger brother a few years later, also age 15. Seattle was a wild and woolly place. They were under martial law shortly after Mayer came here. The territorial governor down in Oregon declared it because of the very severe anti-Chinese riots that were going on. This is before the fire, obviously, which was 1889. Go ahead. This is Seattle in 1884, pre-fire. Next one. Front Street that is First Avenue that we were on. The Occidental Hotel is right here, where Mayer had his first business in 1896 and is now the sinking ship parking garage. Mayer in 1889 was working for a pawnbroker. This is Washington Avenue. This is the route we walked up. Okay, next one. And Albert was around the corner working for a watchmaker named Frederick. Okay? This is post-fire, and the red buildings are buildings that were rebuilt after the fire. Brick and stone. Okay? And you'll notice the population in 10 years went from 4,000 to 40,000. And this is pre-gold rush. Okay, next one. So this is where Mayer had his first business. As a pawnbroker, he bought out his employer. Next one. He went into a somewhat misbegotten partnership with a fellow named Simon Rumpf. We're not sure which one was a bigger crook, but probably Rumpf. Rumpf left town one step ahead of the sheriff in 1894, owing a lot of people a lot of money. And the last indication I had of him was a wanted ad for him in the New Zealand Police Gazette. Next one. So Mayer went into the wholesale jewelry business very quickly and was up there located in the New York clock. Next one. The first street clocks. Next one. This is where Basie Street clock. This is the clock that came in early 1890. This is the clock that Mayer eventually obtained in 1896. Basie was not a very successful jeweler, and then it went from Mayer to more and more, I think, to Bremerton. Next one. Hanson's just a few months later. Another Seth Thomas. Next one. Hanson was a leading jeweler in town. And then the third street clock in Seattle didn't arrive until 1893 and is the first Howard clock to arrive here. Gilger was only around for a year or two and then went back to Ohio. He was actually a fairly successful jeweler and from a wealthy Ohio family, but came out here long enough to marry, I think, a Seattle girl. Okay. Yeah, and there was a depression then. So here's Basie's street clock on Front Street. Next one. And it would have cost $300, $8,000 now in 1890.
Paul, can I interject?
Yeah, sure.
For a second? I was going to say, this is, for those of you staying at the Marriott, this is just, I think Cherry is the closest street here. So Marriott's on 2nd and Cherry, we're on 1st Avenue here. That could be Columbia maybe. So it's just a block, 2 blocks from where you guys are staying.
Next one. Thank you. One more. Okay, this is the first application we know of for putting a street clock up. And why did they have to apply? Well, they're using the public right of way. Rob talked to you about that a little bit yesterday, and to some of you anyway. They're using the public right of way for advertising. And they're able to do it because it's a public service. They're providing time. And the city fairly quickly limited the amount of advertising you could put on it. Just as 2 lines indicating who owned it. Okay, next one. Here we see it again, a good view of it. Go ahead. And this is Gilger's Howard surviving a fire a few years after it was installed. Go ahead. Next one. Okay, so Empire Jewelry, that's Mayer's first business venture, and it was actually 1895 he went into 116 Gessler. Unfortunately, he had another bad partner in this one, and this guy was a New York City wholesale jeweler who was a partner in a very large wholesale jewelry operation there, the name of which now escapes me. But apparently this guy had accumulated a lot of debt to suppliers using the name Empire Jewelry Company. So when Mayer joined up with him, he inherited all the debt this guy was carrying. Mayer recognized that very quickly, lawyered up, reincorporated in February of 1897 as Joseph and Mayer and Brothers. But the creditors continued to haunt him, but Mayer learned very early the value of a good lawyer. And so I think was able to get out from under a lot of that inherited debt. Next one. In 1897, he moved up to 116 Cherry, next door to where we had lunch yesterday, in the old Hope Building. And go ahead. Family home up Yesler Hill in Seattle's first Jewish neighborhood. Up now in the First Hill, Yesler Hill area. Go ahead. This was one more. Downtown was this way. There was a cable car that went up there. Next one. The brothers lived in this boarding house. 1891, Joseph was making a lot of trips to Victoria, supposedly on business. Next one. 1893 brought the next younger brother, Marcus, over. Next. He wed a nice Jewish girl from Victoria. And 2 years later, his brother wed her sister. So this was a very tightly tied together family. Next one. And Joseph and Clara set up housekeeping here and had their first son that same year. The last one. And then Albert and Leo were married in that house, and by 1900 had purchased a house right next door. Okay. Next one. So this is 116 Cherry. This is the Seattle PI, occupied this area here, and there you can see in the corner that street clock that now belongs to L.L. Moore, a jeweler right here. Next one. Next one. Next one. Okay, so this is the storefront occupied, and the Smelting, refining operations up here. Seattle PI is right over here. So that led to some interesting conflicts, trying to gas off the PI employees. They complained to the city, and the mayor had to go to court and was issued a cease and desist order. Next one. So the sign here says Joseph Mayer and Brothers Wholesale Jewelers, and then next one. And then just below it, Seattle Smelting and Refining, which is an operation that they opened up in the Inner Bay area, which is right across from what is now Fremont. It's on the south side of the ship canal. And they had some interesting conflicts up there because the neighbors didn't care for the smell. Most of that was whipped up by a realtor who they had declined to cooperate with in some water ventures and development ventures. And so he was whooping up some ill feeling. Next one. But the big deal was July. Remember, they incorporated in 1896, February. July, the Portland arrives in Seattle from the Yukon with the first shipment of gold. There's no U.S. assay office. Mayor stands ready to assay gold. And does he ever? Next one. This is the process. That was actually the U.S. assay office that opened a year later. Next one. Mayor noted that they had purchased $1 million worth of gold in 1899 or 1898. Next one. Albert and Marcus couldn't resist the call of the gold rush. In June of 1898, we have a record of them crossing the Canadian entry point at the Chilkoot Pass. We know they filed at least one claim, whether they discovered any gold or not. The gold they discovered was the gold that belonged to other guys. They opened a jewelry store there and started purchasing gold and selling nugget jewelry and things like that. Go ahead. This is the scale that currently Mohi has. Here we see Mark Mayer Jr., Marcus's son, with the scale, holding a golden spike that was used for the ceremonial completion of the Alaska Railway in 1923, I think, presented to the chief engineer, and eventually made its way into a collector's hands. And Mark Jr. discovered that in, I think, 1968, and arranged for it to go back for the anniversary. But it's a 14-karat gold spike, worth many, many thousands of dollars, not just for the gold, but still in a private collector's hands in California. Next one. All right, and then we'll just flip through these. Mayer had lots of interesting press in these early years. Next one, daylight robberies, including him chasing the robber down the street to retain his getting stuff back. That's the Inner Bay problem with the smell. Next one. A smash and grab on New Year's Eve. Next one. Guy got caught. Then a counterfeiting problem, kind of a trumped up thing. The prosecutor, sheriff, the state marshal, the United States Marshal, was a very enthusiastic guy. Thought he had a real deal going here. Somebody came into Mayer's store. Mayer wasn't there and didn't preside over but one of his senior clerks did. The guy wanted nickels and quarters gold plated because he said he was going to make jewelry out of it. Well, not a very bright fellow, and he got some even less bright fellows to try to pass these things, which didn't work. So it was traced back to the Mayer brothers. They were hauled in, charged with counterfeiting along with these other guys. They beat the rap. Go ahead. Next one. But not before this very interesting newspaper editor launched a tirade against them in print, and Albert Mayer took him on for $50,000 in criminal libel. Whether he got it or not, I was never able to find a reference, but this was kind of what was going on in their early years. A challenging business environment. Next one. Souvenir spoons were their bread and butter. It started very early. Next. Rhododendron spoon was a design that did not originate with Mayer. It originated with a jeweler in Tacoma, but was a very popular one for many jewelers. This is the first ad in 1900 for a spoon. Go ahead. That's an example of one. It's up here. Go ahead. And this shows the later mayor emblem, it's trademark. Next. And that shows an earlier trademark. Go ahead. There's one of the mountain spoons. You can have them engraved. And this is one of the fraternal pins of great interest for Bremerton. This was a national convention, the grand reunion of the Elks. I haven't looked up where this one was held, but local Elks clubs would have commissioned pins that they would wear that advertised the town they were in. And so Bremerton was advertising the Battleship Oregon, which had been overhauled here, departed from here for the Spanish-American War in 1898, steamed all the way around the Horn and made it to Manila Bay in time to get some shots off. And then up in here is the graving dock, the first graving dock at the shipyard, and for a time the largest on the West Coast. Mayor proudly stamped all of his stuff, which is what you can figure out what he made. Next one. So the old Hogue building was torn down and replaced by the current building that's there, and that started in 1906, so Mayor had to move. He moved to the Coleman building, still there, and he occupied all of this side up to about here was his showroom, his fine work, the enameling, engraving, and so on, and then the factory was in the annex. That building is no longer there, but occupied all of this floor in the annex behind the Coleman building. This was the cover page of his first catalog, an enormous thing like this, really beautiful production. If that ever comes up on eBay, nobody better be bidding. Okay. Next, you guys have got that. Albert Hansen ordered a clock from Seth Thomas in 1906 in October. A week later, there's a cancellation. Next one. Next. And shortly after that, a Howard with a nice top knot shows up, possibly sold by Mayer to Hansen. Certainly Mayer influenced its sale, because 1906 is when Mayer establishes his first formal relationship with Howard as an agent. Go ahead. Next one. Mayer was a silversmith as well as a watchmaker and engineer and designer. And this is the ceremonial silver for the armored cruiser Washington. Next, it consisted of I don't know, almost 100 pieces. I think it was about $3,000 that the state legislature appropriated for it. For the commissioning, the Washington was commissioned in 1907, made it to Seattle with the Great White Fleet in 1908, and the silver was on display in 1907 at Mayer's shop, and then when it came to town, it was the visit ship for Seattle. The other ships were in Port Angeles and around the area, but that silver featured in the paper. Next one. Next. He liked the Navy theme. I love the sailor spoons. They have battleships in the bowls. Next. One of most interest in the Puget Sound is the Nebraska, which was built, the only battleship built in Puget Sound by Moran Shipbuilding. Their home, family home up on Argus Island, is now a very well-known resort. Rosario Resort. Next. Not always happy. Had some labor problems. Go ahead. With some ugliness. The jewelers were striking him. Object to women working alongside Japanese workers. Mayer hired a lot of Japanese workers and had close relationships with a fairly extensive Japanese business community in Washington. Mayer assured the public that he was still in business, and interestingly enough, 1907 has got 150 people working for it. His first tower clock, Coleman Dock, 1908, go ahead. Coleman had just refurbished this area. The big dome is the waiting room, and that is a Howard #1 tower clock that you'll see on the way back, restored by our local chapter of NAWCC. Next slide. Close-up of it. Go ahead. Next one. 1912, it had a real problem. Steamer changing piers, going from a coaling pier up to where it was going to be loaded out for a trip up to Alaska. The skipper rang up back full, and the engineer gave him a head full, and sliced right through the edge of the waiting room, which was packed with people, sheared off the clock. No one died. About a dozen people ended up in the water, a few injuries, but no one was killed. The clock survived, and the mayor refurbished it, and they put it back up in a new tower. Next one. Okay, so I mentioned before that Mayor had the official Yukon Pacific concession. It was in the mint exhibit in the government building. He actually struck these coins there, demonstrated how coins were minted. This is the watch fob. Next. It had the official symbol here with the lady representing Asia in Japanese garb holding a ship, a lady in American garb holding a train representing the Inland Empire, and the lady in the middle holding a very large gold nugget representing Alaska and Yukon. And then this certified about as much as you could that it was official. The signatures of all the bigwigs that commissioned the expo. Next. Next. These were some of the souvenir dollars. Next. Next. And City of Seattle, yeah, I'm showing one off here. Next one. This was an envelope that they were sold in that certified them, and it says for duplicates, see Joseph Mayer. And this was the top of the line. It was an enamel of the symbol on a silver background. This one turned up on eBay in Spain. Next. The spoon, showing the same symbol. Go ahead. With all the official signatures. Next. And he had a design patent for this handle. One of several design patents for spoon designs he had. Next. So the first Mayer manufactured street clock I could really pin down is this one on Coleman Dock. Those of you who are familiar with Coleman Dock, well, you've all walked across the current version of this bridge from First Avenue out to Coleman Dock here. The first version of that bridge was completed in 1909, and I think very shortly after that. This picture is 1911. Clock with Coleman Dock on it appeared right here. Coleman Dock Company is here. Mayer's factory is right up here, and Mayer's showrooms and enameling are right here.
So his factory is where Top Donuts is now.
Right there. Okay. Next. Okay, clock systems. Brings us to our clocks here in the museum. The first clock system I have a record of is at the observatory, now called the Theodore, I can't think of it, something observatory at UW. It's the second oldest building still in existence. It's just inside the gate at the corner of 45th and 15th. Next. This is what's called the transit room, and we see a Mayer master clock here, which is still, the transit room still looks like this. The instrument here in the center is a transit telescope, open the ceiling, and it's lined up on the north-south axis, the meridian, and it is used to track stars going across at specific times. And then hiding back in here is a Riefler German precision astronomical regulator, about as good a regulator as you could get at the time. So the stars timed the Riefler regulator, and the Mayer clock could be synchronized to the Riefler. So it was a time service, and then the master clock drove slave clocks around the college. Next.
What
This
would,
is the
what would
movement.
that sort of thing cost back then? Any idea?
I don't know, a lot. Well, I saw a figure for what was allocated to equip the observatory. It was like $5,000. So a big chunk of it went to this. There's also a refracting telescope that preceded this. This is the movement in that master clock. And it was wound with a winding system that we'll see Mayer invented. It's a Howard, about 2 inches taller than a Howard Model 0 street clock movement, so larger movement.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to mention that the observatory was made with surplus stone from the Denny building next door, so the cost, there was very little construction material cost,
Yeah.
so just to reinforce your point.
And the first one, I know, was built by James Taylor, the first, personally, built the first one, and he may have built some of this one. But in his spare time, the professor of astronomy built the building. Yeah. Yeah. Next.
I'll notice it has a winding drum on it besides auto winding.
Yes, so it was an early one.
So apparently at one time it made a weight-driven movement.
I think he purchased the movement with that winding drum on, and then he just added the gears. I don't think it came with that, because he patented that in 1912, so he had that winding system available with. He installed these types of systems in high schools all over the area, and at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, which we'll see more of in a minute. Next. This is the Frederick and Nelson slave clock. Frederick and Nelson had the system, and this is one of theirs, and you can see that it really is this clock. We do not have this top piece, I don't believe, right?
Right.
We do not have that. There's a top piece there that we don't have. But this piece to here is sitting right there. And you can see the hands are identical. Actually, the hands are a little blurred. It was a time exposure, and the clock was running. But these are...
Now, where was that picture taken?
In Frederick and Nelson. It's in the archive at Mohi. Next.
Paul, if I just mentioned real quick, so for those of you who are wandering around later today, it's now the Nordstrom building. Nordstrom was occupied for
What was Frederick and Nelson?
It was a great department store. It was Seattle's second, let's see, Southwick and something or other. It was the first big...
McDougal and Southwick.
McDougal and Southwick. Actually, Schwabacher Hardware that I pointed out yesterday, that was the first sort of hardware, or department store. And McDougal and Southwick was a big one, followed by Frederick and Nelson.
It was the really high-end department store.
Yeah.
Next. Okay, so this is the grandest Mayer master clock surviving. It was in Meyer and Frank's department store in Portland, which was one of the great department stores in Portland and on the whole West Coast. It was famous. The master clock stood in their conference room. This beautiful dial, mercury pendulum, and you can see the size. There's a normal door. Next. And lots more. Go ahead. So the Puget Sound clocks, ours. Next. The Howard number 74 special regulator came from the chronometer repair shop and drove slave clocks around the shipyard. Next. Had a mercury pendulum, and there's Mayer's plaque that says, and he doesn't give Howard credit on this one. Many of the plaques are joint, Mayer and Howard, but this one he just says Joseph Mayer, Electromagnetic Time Systems. Next. What makes it a number 74 special for the clock nuts? Next. This was a lesser one that is now in our display out here. Next. We had a little shipyard humor. This we discovered when Leon overhauled this clock. We found this had been painted over apparently by a supervisor that didn't share the sense of humor of the worker. Next. And this was inside the 74. The last time it was cleaned and lubed, 1974. It looks okay until you get down there, Horlube, clock oil, and mutton tallow. I think the guy that did that was just seeing if the supervisor ever read the tags. Next. Okay, so what makes it a special movement? It's actually a Howard number 89 electric winding movement. There's a solenoid down here that pops once a minute based on contacts you'll see that winds a little spring and keeps the clock going. What made it a special was the posts for the dial were dropped down so that now the seconds bit comes right out of the middle of the dial and the hour and minute hands are down at the bottom of the dial. Next. Very few people are familiar with that, although it seems to have been a favorite model for Mayer to use as a master clock. Okay, next. And these are the contacts on the arbor, the escape arbor that make the electrical impulses. Next. Here you can see a side view. These rotate around and contact there every 30 seconds. So one of them winds the clock and the other provides a minute impulse. Next. Slave clocks are what make a clock system. This is one of the Fire and Frank slave clocks. Cast bronze with M&F down under there. Next. This is the Frederick and Nelson Employees lunchroom clock. You've already seen this example of the slave clock, probably in the same system as this one. Next. This is the internals of the slave clock, model 10B. An interesting model number, and the only one I've ever seen associated with a Mayer slave clock is the model number 10B. If you don't know, this one doesn't have a label on it. It's a four-way. But next, that is the same movement that's in here. This is the movement as it's being put back together by Leon. Next. And this is the clock that we did get to see yesterday. This is from the archives at Mohi. It was my first clue that Mayer had done a clock system for the Arctic Club. The Arctic Club was formed in, I think, 1908, 1907 by people who had been to Alaska, the Yukon as sourdoughs, miners, robbers, whatever. But they got together and formed a club, and then in 1914 they built a very elaborate clubhouse that became the Arctic Club and is now a Hilton Hotel. And this clock survives in the dome room of the Arctic Club.
How big is the face, just to give us an idea, that people haven't seen it?
Bigger than this. Probably, I think it's probably about like this. So that'd be the scale. It's probably this. It's probably about that broad, and I'd say the dial is about like that.
It was still in place?
It is. In its original spot. Right. Oh, that's right. The walruses are in keeping with the building because the building has these wonderful walruses in terracotta all the way around. So it was a big business. That's the test stand at Mayer's factory. 103 slave clocks undergoing test. You can see they're all working all at the same time. We're actually, well, there's one there that's an hour off, but and these guys, I don't know. Next. Mayer had a little promotional scheme. If you bought a clock, he would make a souvenir spoon you can hand out. We know of two survivors. This is the Suter clock here. These are the styles of 4-dial clocks that he started putting in for the top-end jewelers. These would cost probably well over $1,000. Next. This is his most amazing clock. It was made as a presentation for the then Crown Prince and eventually Emperor of Japan, Hirohito. It stands about 5 feet tall. Go ahead. Just click through these. It stands about 5 feet tall. Go ahead. And the movement in here, and one more. The movement, it says, took 6 months, and I've blown it up. I've got a high resolution. It looks like the Mayer or Howard movement, but you can see that the face of it's been engine turned and beautifully polished, and it's apparently jeweled. Various time zones around here. a sun that tracks around the globe. And it probably was a casualty of the war. I've contacted various museums in the palace, archivists in Japan, and they were fascinated by this clock, but they had no knowledge of it. It was presented by the Japanese Business Association. Next. So this is a Tacoma clock with its associated spoon. There's only one other clock we know of with this huge box. I think you can actually get inside that box and almost stand up, right?
Yep.
Chuck Roser from Lockport, New York, is one of our professional street and tower clock folks. He takes care of this clock now. It is in an auto mall in Cicero, New York. And really tarted up. Does it still have its sound system, Chuck?
No.
It used to have a sound system to play Christmas carols. It came out of Tacoma in the 70s. Thanks. This is one of the grand 8-dial clocks showing, and survives in San Francisco. It was his first 8-dial clock made just in time for the Panama Pacific Exposition for a jeweler on Market Street, and it is within a block of its original location. Right on the edge of the Tenderloin now. An exciting place to visit, so when I found out.
It's across from Nordstrom's.
It is across from Nordstrom's, but go the other direction, you meet some interesting people. Next. So, Snohomish County Courthouse clock in Everett, 1910. That was his first courthouse clock. Next. And it is a number 2 striker.
Still functioning?
Still functioning. Beautiful clock. Next. Next year, they installed the clock out in the Grays Harbor County Courthouse in Montesano. Next. Next. This is the dial before it left the mayor's shop, heading for Montesano. Cast in bronze. It's a Howard number 2 with ordinary gravity escapement. All this stuff here is for regulating lights. Thank you. Next. Mayor labeled it. It was part of the clock system. Next. This is one of the surviving slave clocks that's no longer a slave. There was a Howard marble dial. Next. And Pual County Courthouse, which you heard striking as we started, installed in 1915. Next. Mayor was quite proud of this. He says, his automatic constant force electric winder. And he gives credit to a local jeweler that he co-opted with a payment of $200 to speak for the quality of Howard clocks and Mayor's skill at installing them to the county commissioners to ensure he got the bid. He didn't have any other bidders, so he got it. Next. And you can see part of the winding system. A couple of tower clock nuts over there.
Yeah, they had to fall.
Next.
Family.
Next. This just shows some of the details. Just scroll through these. Go ahead. Now this is the only thing left of the time system. A 2-lobed, and I believe it's probably agate cam. This made a contact, 2 contacts every rotation. In this kind of train, the so-called minute arbor goes around once every 2 minutes, so you needed that. But that was how the time signals got off. There were some contacts here that operated on. Next. The strike train showing the winding system, and the times train with the winding system. Go ahead. And this is the winder. And we'll have a little movie of that. Motor down here, gets to the bottom, winds itself up like a monkey on a rope, and there's the limit switch. So this looks like here. Go ahead. So we have very few pictures, but this one comes from Armistice Day, 1918. Mayor assembled over 100 of his employees for a parade in Seattle. It was almost a spontaneous thing. Businesses let out and everybody marched through the streets. But they had a formal picture taken. I blew up this corner, and I am reasonably certain now that this is Joseph, this is Albert, the next younger brother, this is Marcus, the youngest brother in the business. This is Alexander, Albert's son, who became manager for a short period of time in the 1950s. You guys back here are probably younger brothers, Emil and I can't remember the other guy's name. They worked for Mayor but were never equity partners. And this is Mayor's youngest son. His oldest son, Siegfried, was still recovering from injuries received in the Naval Reserve during the war up in New York. Next. So in 1920, the firm split into Joseph Mayer Incorporated and Mayer Brothers. Very intense family. They lived close together for a long time, and they had the family dynamics that often happen. Joseph and Albert really came to loggerheads over business practices. Joseph wanted to build clocks. Albert wanted to sell stuff and make money. I think it was almost as simple as that. Mayer Brothers continued very successfully in the wholesale business. Joseph continued manufacturing at Coleman Street. Next. 1924, we had 30 street clocks in central Seattle, almost all of them Mayer. Next. Things did not end well. Joseph lost control of his company in 1923, reorganized and brought in other investors. He was vice president, and it continued on reasonably successfully, but it was a downward trend. Next. Lost his wife in 1928. Younger brother Albert passed away in 1929. Stock market crash occurred. Next. Next. 1936, he moved out of the Coleman building all the way up to Dexter Street, which was just 5 blocks or so from where we were yesterday in South Lake Union. We're hoping to save that clock. Took a big 4-dial clock or 8-dial clock with him. We think came out of Seattle, belonging to a jeweler who couldn't keep up the payments. Next. And then on June 7, 1937, Joseph took his own life in his office on Dexter Street. Probably a combination of health and challenging business. The business continued on under different names, mostly manufacturing souvenir spoons from the original dies, all the way up to about 1960. Next. So we have over 100 street clocks that we've been able to identify, about half of which we think survive. They're spread all over the West. Many clock systems, at least 9 tower clocks. And last but not least, the jewelry business, and these days, a small jewelry store could not generally get credit from a bank to do business. They depended on the wholesaler to extend credit. Then December hit, the jewelry store made their money for the year over Christmas, and they paid off the wholesaler. And that was really how business was done. And if you had a good wholesaler, you could survive hard times because he would carry it. And both Joseph Mayer and the Mayer brothers had very good reputations as good wholesalers who carried many jewelers through bad times. Both Jorgen Nelson and Moeller here in town, I believe, owe their livelihood to them. And it was the father of many the first big chains on the West Coast, and the descendants of Weisfield and Goldberg, now just Weisfields, are still around. No connection to the original family, but of course, Ben Bridge continues on, and we met a fine exemplar in Herb Bridge yesterday. So, that's it. Thank you. I have one more video to flick through with. Is there any?
Can I ask a question about lunch?
I don't know. Yeah, well, let's get a count. Yeah, get a count of who wants to join us at Anthony's for lunch. We have reservations for, I think, 15, so count it all up.
14, 15. We have one for 16, so that's perfect.
Okay, so let's see.
Paul?
Yes.
I would mention to anybody that's parked out on the street that it's a 2-hour limit on parking. And so you want to watch your time. I don't know what time you came in. I'm starting.
But Anthony's has free parking underneath it.
That's correct. But out on the street, if you go beyond that 2 hour, it's a $40-some ticket.
We're. Did anybody get here before 9:30?
Yeah.
Okay, you can move yours. We're going to be, well, we'll be retiring very shortly here to head down to the other clock. Right. But we give people a chance to look at stuff. Feel free to open all of these open. Just lift. And there's a couple of magnifying glasses if you want to look closely at some of the stuff.
Are those all yours?
Yeah. You want to be careful. This baby was one of the souvenirs. It's a hat pin. Don't mess with ladies wearing big hats. And it has one of the medals on the
Can
end.
someone push the cable in a little bit?
What are you looking at on the video?
Can someone push the cable a little bit on the computer? It's,
Oh,
there you go, perfect, thank you.
okay.
And I'm gonna move my car to a different street.
Yeah, you have to move it to a
I
different.
can't believe they do it on Sundays, but they do.
It's Saturday.
On the
It's
bottom
Saturday,
right
that's
corner,
right.
oh, there you go. Bottom right corner has the,
Okay, we're looking at the Clallam County Courthouse clock again. That's the 1.5 second.
Turn this one off.
That's the 1.5 second 9-foot pendulum. And now it's starting to strike, and you can see the strike weight descending. That's what's driving the strike. Is this?
You pick up your pointer.
Oh, there it is.
Steve's phone.
We need to adjust the, get him to adjust the camera, and Chuck pointed that out when he saw that, and it's pretty obvious that that did.
Wow.
Now we'll, the bell was cast in New York, the Neely Bell Company, and I think they still are in business. Okay, now it's rewinding. Climbing back up the road. They say you can hear it all over the courthouse. Rewinding.
Once an hour?
Yeah.
Once a day?
The time side is about once a day, once or twice a day. The strike side is probably a couple of times, maybe 3 times a day. This was patented, was invented by an employee of Mayer's and patented in 1912. And then the patent was assigned to Mayer. And there you can see the sprockets engaging the chain. Mayer's claim on this was that, and the reason he called it a constant torque system was other electric winding systems, the power goes off the train during the wind cycle, which complicates matters a little bit. The power is never off the train during this. It's always under tension, whether it's winding or dropping or just going down. That's good.
Of course, the winding system on the Queen Anne High School clock is directly.
That is a conventional. That's a conventional Howard winding system. That's probably the first clock system that Mayer put in 1908 at Queen Anne High School. Then he put the one in Broadway High School in 1912. About the same time in Franklin High School.
Are the others still there? The one in Broadway is still there.
Broadway, none of the others survived.
Well, Queen Anne is at the.
Queen Anne
Yeah.
is in the museum in Bellingham.
Yeah.
And that has a conventional Howard, I think number 0 movement.
It's a zero movement.
It's a number 0 movement and gravity or a ordinary deadbeat grand statement. This video was taken for me by Joe Winborn, who's the facilities director for Clallam County and the Clallam County Fair. He's very proud of that clock. Well, that's one of the secrets. One of the reasons these winding systems didn't survive was they didn't grease them. If you don't grease those things probably about every 2 months, it'll eat itself up.
And you know about the Seth Thomas records, that they actually, Seth Thomas on number 16, the Joseph Mayer.
That's right.
Put an auto winding system on it.
And I would dearly love to know if any Seth Thomas clock, tower clock ever, or street clock ever showed up with that system. But yes, Seth Thomas was evaluating this, sent Mayer a tower clock mechanism, and Mayer fitted it with the winding system and sent it back to Seth Thomas. But that's the last we heard.
Well,
of
the
it.
winding system we have on the Seth Thomas up at the museum, the
That's-
motor is the weight, and it climbs up the chain. There's a pole switch that stops at top and bottom, activates
Does it?
when it hits the bottom. And,
I thought it was an endless chain kind of way.
well, it's endless chain, but the motor climbs up the chain.
The motor does. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to look at that one again.
Yeah.
Because that's not the
That is-
same.
That is the driving weight for it.
That's not the same as the ones that are pictured. The ones that are pictured in the Seth Thomas catalogs don't.
They don't do that.
They don't do that.
No, this climbs up the chain.
Oh,
There's a
Lord.
pole switch on it.
God, I looked at that. I've got pictures of it. I never noticed it. I'm gonna have to
Didn't look close enough.
get that. Yeah. So go ahead. We can turn the lights on here. And,
I did.
oh, they are on.
It takes a
That's as good as it
while.
gets.
No, it comes up, it takes a
Oh.
while.
Okay. So feel free to walk around and look at any of that stuff. Our reservations are for 1 o'clock, and probably ought to plan on leaving here right around noon to go up to the other street clock and get a look at that, and then wind our way down to Anthony's for some.
No, mine's in a big parking lot, a couple blocks down the street.
So you're in good shape.